Marcus Ellis stepped out of his car with a calmness that felt almost unnatural for the moment. He had been driving for hours, leaving behind the chaos of Chicago to visit a small town he'd heard so much about but never actually seen. It was quiet here, too quiet compared to what he was used to, but Marcus liked it. There was something peaceful about the way the streets stretched wide and empty, lined with old brick buildings and faded signs advertising diners and shops long forgotten by time. He parked his car near one of those diners right under a sign that clearly said no parking. Marcus didn't notice it at first. His mind was still caught up in thoughts of work, family, and everything else waiting for him back home. All he wanted was a cup of coffee before heading to his next destination. So he locked his car, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the diner, unaware that this simple decision would soon lead to more trouble than he could have imagined. Inside the diner, the air smelled like grease and burnt toast, but Marcus didn't mind. He ordered his coffee, black, and leaned against the UI counter while he waited. A few locals sat at tables nearby, chatting softly or reading newspapers. No one paid him any attention, which suited Marcus just fine. He wasn't looking for company, just caffeine. When he finally left the diner, holding his steaming cup of coffee, he noticed two figures standing beside his car. At first glance, they looked official, uniforms, badges, serious expressions. Cops. Marcus slowed his pace, trying to keep his face neutral as he approached them. His heart began to beat faster, though he tried not to let it show. "Evening, officers," Marcus said politely, stopping a few feet away from them. "Is there a problem?" One of the cops, a younger guy with short blonde hair and an air of nervous energy, glanced up from writing something on a clipboard. "Sir, do you know why we're here?" he asked, his voice clipped. Marcus frowned slightly. "Not really. I just came out of the diner. Did I do something wrong?" The second cop, taller and broader, crossed his arms over his chest. His name, tag read Collins. Officer Collins gave Marcus a hard look. "You parked illegally. This spot is clearly marked as no parking." Marcus blinked, glancing at the sign above his car. Sure enough, there it was. No parking. "Oh," he said, keeping his tone even. "I didn't see that. Sorry about that. I'll move my car right now." But instead of letting him go, Officer Collins took a step closer. "License and registration, please." Marcus hesitated just for a second. Then he nodded and reached into his pocket for his wallet. "Sure thing," he said, pulling out his driver's license. "Here you go." Officer Collins studied the ID carefully, his eyes narrowing as if searching for something suspicious. Meanwhile, the younger officer continued scribbling on the clipboard, occasionally glancing at Marcus with an unreadable expression. "Anything else you need?" Marcus asked after a moment, trying to sound casual. He sipped his coffee, hoping to appear relaxed despite the growing tension. "We'll let you know when we're done," Officer Collins replied sharply. "Stay put." Marcus nodded again, taking another sip of his coffee. He told himself to stay calm. These things happen sometimes. People got pulled over for minor infractions all the time. It wasn't a big deal. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why did these guys seem so tense? Was it really just about a parking ticket? As the seconds ticked by, Marcus became increasingly aware of the stares from passers-by. Some people slowed down to watch, curiosity plain on their faces. Others pulled out their phones, snapping pictures or recording videos. One teenager, a girl with bright pink hair and oversized headphones, stood across the street holding her phone up and pointing it directly at Marcus and the officers. "Great," Marcus thought. "Now everyone thinks I'm some kind of criminal. Can I ask what's taking so long?" Marcus ventured, breaking the silence. "I already gave you my license. Is there a reason you're still holding me here?" Officer Collins scowled. "We're doing our job, sir. You can wait." Marcus clenched his jaw but forced himself to nod. "Okay, fair enough." Just then, the younger officer spoke up. "Hey, Danny, check this out." He held up Marcus's license, squinting at it. "This address, isn't that where all those protests were last year?" Over in Chicago? Danny, Officer Collins, looked at the license again, then back at Marcus. Is that true? Were you involved in those protests? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What does that have to do with a parking ticket? It's relevant, Collins snapped. Answer the question. No, I wasn't involved, Marcus said, evenly. I live in that area, but I don't attend protests, not my thing. The younger officer exchanged a skeptical glance with Collins. Still, it's interesting timing, don't you think? A guy from Chicago shows up here, parks illegally, and acts like nothing's wrong. I didn't mean to park illegally, Marcus interrupted, his patience starting to wear thin. I told you, I didn't see the sign. If you want to give me a ticket, fine. But this feels like a lot of hassle for such a small mistake. Collins stepped closer, his posture aggressive now. Maybe it wouldn't feel like hassle if you cooperated fully, hands where I can see them. Marcus froze, his coffee halfway to his lips. Excuse me? You heard me. Hands where I can see them. For a moment, Marcus considered arguing, but he knew better. Instead, he slowly placed both hands on top of his head, gripping his coffee tightly in one hand. All right, he said, his voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. Now will you tell me what's going on? We're conducting an investigation, Collins replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. And until we're satisfied you're staying right here. An investigation? For a parking ticket? Marcus almost laughed, but he bit his tongue. This wasn't funny. Not anymore. Across the street, the teenager with the pink hair was still filming. Her phone screen glowed brightly in the fading sunlight, capturing every word, every movement. Other bystanders joined in, whispering to each other and shaking their heads. Someone muttered, "This is ridiculous," loud enough for Marcus to hear. He took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay composed. Losing his temper wouldn't help. If anything, it would only make things worse. So he stood there, hands on, his head watching as the officers debated quietly between themselves. Finally, Marcus decided to try one last tactic. "Look," he said, lowering his hands slightly. "If you really think there's a problem here, maybe we can resolve it quickly. I've got someone who might be able to clear this up." Collins shot him a sharp look. "Who?" "My friend," Marcus said simply. "He's the chief of police." The two officers exchanged a glance, their skepticism evident. But Marcus didn't care. He reached into his jacket pocket, not for a weapon but for his phone, and dialed the number he knew by heart. On the third ring, a familiar voice answered. "Devin Reed." "Hey, Dev," Marcus said, relief flooding his voice. "It's me, Marcus. I'm in a bit of a situation and I could use your help." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of situation?" Marcus explained briefly, keeping his tone light despite the absurdity of the moment. When he finished, Devin let out a low whistle. "Hold tight, Marcus, I'll handle it." Hanging up, Marcus turned back to the officers who were now watching him closely. "My friend's on his way," he said, his confidence returning. "You might want to rethink how you're handling this." Officer Collins opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, a new figure appeared on the scene. A supervisor sent by Devin arrived just in time to diffuse the escalating tension. And as the crowd continued to grow, Marcus realized that this seemingly ordinary day was about to become anything but. The supervisor who arrived on the scene was a middle-aged man named Greg Sanders. He had a no-nonsense look about him, with gray hair neatly combed back and a stern expression that made it clear he wasn't there to waste time. Officer Collins and the younger officer, whose name turned out to be Harper, snapped to attention as soon as they saw him approaching. They were clearly uncomfortable, though neither said a word. Greg glanced at Marcus first, then at the two officers. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice firm but calm. Officer Collins stepped forward, holding up Marcus's license like it was evidence of some great crime. "Sir, this individual parked illegally. We were conducting routine checks when we noticed the violation." Marcus crossed his arms, trying not to roll his eyes. "Routine checks? That seemed like a stretch. Still, he stayed quiet, letting Greg take control of the situation. And? Greg prompted, raising an eyebrow. Did you issue a ticket? We were in the process, Collins replied quickly. But then we noticed his address. It's from Chicago, sir, a neighborhood known for protests and unrest. Greg frowned. Are you saying his address is relevant to a parking violation? Well, Collins hesitated, glancing at Harper for support. It raised some concerns, sir. Given recent events, we thought it best to investigate further. Greg sighed deeply, shaking his head. A parking ticket doesn't require an investigation. It requires issuing a ticket and moving on. Am I wrong? Neither officer answered. Instead, they shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Greg turned to Marcus next. Sir, I apologize for any inconvenience caused. Can you confirm your vehicle is registered to you? Yes, it is, Marcus said, pulling out his registration papers from his glove compartment. He handed them over without hesitation. Here you go. Greg examined the documents briefly, nodding once he confirmed everything matched. Then he looked back at Collins and Harper. This seems straightforward. Issue the ticket and let's wrap this up. Harper nodded eagerly, reaching for his clipboard, but Collins hesitated, glancing nervously toward the growing crowd. More people had gathered since the supervisor's arrival, many of them filming or taking photos. The teenager with pink hair was still recording, her phone held high as she narrated what was happening to her online audience. This isn't just about a ticket, Collins muttered under his breath, though everyone nearby could hear him. There's more to it. Greg's patience was wearing thin. More to it? Like what, exactly? If you have a legitimate concern, state it now. Otherwise, follow procedure. Before Collins could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Everyone turned to watch as the driver's door opened, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s. This was Devin Reed, the chief of police, and Marcus's childhood friend. Devin stepped out of the car with authority, his uniform crisp and polished. His presence commanded respect, and even the officers straightened their posture instinctively. He scanned the scene quickly, his sharp eyes landing first on Marcus, then on Greg, and finally on Collins and Harper. What's going on here? Devin demanded, his tone leaving no room for excuses. Greg stepped forward immediately. Chief Reed, I was just addressing the situation. Officers Collins and Harper detained this gentleman over a parking violation, but things escalated unnecessarily. Devin nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on Collins. Is that true, Officer Collins? Collins swallowed hard, clearly intimidated. Sir, we were following protocol. We noticed the illegal parking and initiated a routine stop. However, additional factors came into play. Additional factors? Devin repeated, his voice dangerously calm. Such as? The individual's address, sir, Collins admitted reluctantly, and his demeanor during questioning. My demeanor? Marcus interjected, unable to stay silent any longer. I was polite the entire time. I cooperated, fully. What exactly did I do wrong besides park in the wrong spot? Devin held up a hand, silencing Marcus. Let me handle this. Turning back to Collins, he continued. So, because of where someone lives and how they behave during a routine traffic stop, you decided to escalate the situation. Do you realize how problematic that sounds? Collins stammered, struggling to defend himself. Sir, we were just being cautious. You always tell us to trust our instincts. Devin shook his head, disappointment etched across his face. Cautious doesn't mean harassing someone over a parking ticket, and instincts don't justify ignoring proper procedure. Did either of you review body cam footage before escalating? Both officers exchanged guilty looks but said nothing. That's what I thought, Devin said sharply. Effective immediately, both of you are relieved of duty pending further review. Go home and wait for instructions. Collins and Harper froze, stunned by the order. For a moment, neither moved. Finally, Harper muttered a quiet, "Yes, sir," and hurried off, followed closely by Collins. Once they were gone, Devin turned to Marcus, his expression softening slightly. You all right, man? Marcus nodded, exhaling slowly. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks for coming. No thanks needed, Devon replied, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. We've been friends too long for me to sit back while nonsense like this happens. Greg cleared his throat, reminding them of his presence. Chief Reed, may I suggest we issue the parking ticket now and disperse the crowd? This has drawn enough attention already. Devon agreed, waving Harper's abandoned clipboard toward Greg. Do it. Keep it professional. No drama. As Greg began writing the ticket, Devon faced the growing crowd. Some people were whispering among themselves while others continued filming. The teenager with pink hair, Lila, as Marcus later learned, was still live streaming, her phone pointed directly at Devon. To everyone watching, Devon announced loudly, ensuring his voice carried over the murmurs. This incident highlights why accountability matters. Mistakes happen, but we must address them openly and fairly. Rest assured, appropriate action will be taken. His words earned nods of approval from several bystanders, though a few remained skeptical. Lila zoomed in on Devon's face, capturing his determined expression before panning back to Marcus. When Greg finished writing the ticket, he handed it to Marcus with a sheepish apology. Again, my apologies for the inconvenience, sir. Have a good day. Marcus accepted the ticket graciously, tucking it into his pocket. Thanks, I appreciate it. With the formalities complete, Devon gestured for Marcus to join him near the SUV. Come on, let's get out of here. We can talk. Somewhere quieter. As they walked away, the crowd began to disperse, though many lingered to discuss what had happened. Lila stopped streaming only after Devon and Marcus drove off, her video already racking up thousands of views online. Inside the SUV, Devon glanced at Marcus, concern evident in his eyes. You sure you're okay? Those guys didn't lay a hand on you, did they? No, they didn't touch me, Marcus assured him. But it was frustrating. I know stuff like this happens all the time, but experiencing it firsthand, it hits different. I know, Devon said quietly. That's why I took this job, to make sure crap like this stops happening, or at least gets handled better. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in their thoughts. Eventually, Devon broke the quiet. Look, I'll make sure this gets addressed publicly. Internal Affairs will investigate, and I'll push for policy changes if needed. But in the meantime, try not to let it ruin your trip. You came here to relax, right? Marcus chuckled softly. Relax? After today? Not likely. But yeah, I'll manage. Devon smiled faintly. Good, because I've got plans for us tomorrow. Let's show you around town properly, show these folks that not everything here is bad news. The rest of the ride passed in lighter conversation, with Devon sharing stories about his work, and Marcus recounting amusing anecdotes from Chicago. By the time they reached Devon's house, a modest but cozy place on the outskirts of town, the tension from earlier had faded significantly. Over dinner, they discussed what had happened. In greater detail, Devon listened intently as Marcus described how the encounter felt from his perspective, nodding occasionally and jotting down notes. Your experience matters, Devon emphasized. If we want real change, we need voices like yours speaking up. Marcus appreciated the sentiment but couldn't help feeling wary. Change takes time, Dev. People have been talking about reform for years, yet situations like mine keep happening. I know, Devon admitted. But every step counts. Even small victories add up. Today you stood your ground, tomorrow we build on that. By the end of the evening, Marcus felt a renewed sense of hope. Despite the challenges ahead, having a friend like Devon, who genuinely cared about making a difference, made all the difference. As he settled into the guest room for the night, Marcus reflected on the day's events. What had started as a minor inconvenience had turned into something much bigger. And while he hadn't planned for any of it, he realized that sometimes life threw opportunities your way when you least expected them. Little did Marcus know, the events of that day would spark conversations far beyond the small Midwestern town. Conversations that would ripple outward, inspiring others to demand better, not just for themselves but for everyone. The next morning, Marcus woke up early. the events of the previous day still fresh in his mind. He lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. It wasn't just the parking ticket, or the way the officers had acted. It was the bigger picture. How often did things like this happen to people who didn't have someone like Devin Reed to call, people who didn't have connections or influence? The thought weighed heavily on him. When he finally got out of bed, Devin was already in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of bacon and eggs filled the air, and Marcus couldn't help but smile. For all the seriousness of his job, Devin had always been the kind of guy who could make you feel at home with a simple meal. "Morning," Devin said as Marcus entered the kitchen. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah, thanks," Marcus replied, taking a seat at the small wooden table. "I needed it." Devin nodded, flipping the bacon in the pan. "Good, because today we're going to figure out what to do next." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Devin explained, setting plates of food on the table, "this isn't over, not by a long shot. What happened yesterday wasn't just about you. It's part of a bigger problem. And if we don't address it now, it'll keep happening to other people." Marcus sighed, picking up his fork. "I know, but what can we really do? You've already disciplined the officers. That's a start, right?" "It's a start," Devin agreed. "But it's not enough. We need accountability, transparency, and action, real action, not just lip service." They ate in silence for a few minutes, both lost in their thoughts. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "So, what's the plan?" Devin leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee. "First, I'm calling a press conference. I want to explain exactly what happened and why it was unacceptable. I also want to apologize, not just to you, but to the community. Trust has been broken, and it's my job to rebuild it." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's brave of you. Are you sure you're ready for the backlash?" Devin chuckled dryly. "Backlash comes with the territory. But yeah, I'm ready. This isn't about me. It's about doing the right thing." After breakfast, Devin grabbed his phone and made a series of calls. He spoke to the mayor, the city council, and internal affairs, briefing them on the situation and outlining his plans. By the time he finished, the news of the press conference was already spreading online. Lila's video from the day before had gone viral, sparking heated debates across social media. Some people praised Devin for stepping in, while others accused him of favoritism. Either way, everyone wanted answers. By noon, the town hall was packed. Reporters, residents, and activists filled the room, cameras flashing and microphones pointed toward the podium where Devin stood. Marcus sat quietly in the front row, feeling a mix of pride and unease. He knew this moment mattered, not just for him, but for everyone watching. Devin cleared his throat, waiting for the crowd to settle before speaking. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Yesterday, an incident occurred involving one of our officers and a member of this community. While I won't go into every detail, I will say this. What happened was wrong. It was unnecessary, and it does not reflect the values of this department or this town." A murmur rippled through the audience, but Devin continued. "The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. Additionally, I am working with internal affairs to review our policies and ensure something like this doesn't happen again." He paused, looking directly at the cameras. "To the individual affected, Marcus Ellis, I offer my sincerest apology. You were treated unfairly, and for that I am truly sorry. No one should be subjected to harassment or intimidation, especially over something as minor as a parking violation." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. He hadn't expected such a public acknowledgement, let alone an apology. It meant more than he could put into words. Devin went on, addressing the broader issues at play. "This incident highlights a larger problem within law enforcement, not just here, but nationwide. Racial profiling, bias, and misuse of power are unacceptable. As chief of police, it is my responsibility to lead by example and push for meaningful change." He outlined several steps he planned to take, including implementing mandatory de-escalation training for all officers, establishing a civilian oversight board, and increasing transparency through regular community meetings. Each announcement was met with applause, though some skeptics remained unconvinced. When the press conference ended, reporters swarmed Devon, firing questions from every direction. "Chief Reed, do you think this will restore trust in the department?" one asked. "It's a step in the right direction," Devon replied. "But trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It takes consistent effort and accountability." Another reporter turned to Marcus, who had stayed close to Devon throughout the event. "Mr. Ellis, how do you feel about the chief's response?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly. "I appreciate Chief Reed's leadership and willingness to address the issue head-on. What happened to me was frustrating, but it's also an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to make things better for everyone." His words resonated with many in the audience, earning nods of approval. As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus noticed Lila standing nearby, her phone still in hand. She smiled shyly when she saw him looking. "Thanks for streaming yesterday," Marcus said, approaching her. "You helped bring attention to what happened." Lila shrugged modestly. "Just doing my part. It's important for people to see stuff like this, otherwise it gets swept under the rug." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "And I'm glad you were there." Later that afternoon, Marcus and Devon sat together in the living room watching the news coverage of the press conference. Social media was ablaze with reactions ranging from praise to criticism. Some commenters accused Devon of grandstanding, while others hailed him as a hero. Marcus scrolled through the posts, shaking his head. "People are passionate," Devon remarked, leaning back on the couch. "That's good. Passion drives change." "But it's exhausting," Marcus added. "All this attention, I didn't ask for any of it." The days following the press conference felt like a whirlwind for Marcus. Everywhere he went, people recognized him. Some thanked him for standing up, while others simply stared, whispering behind his back. It wasn't easy being at the center of attention, but Marcus reminded himself that this was bigger than him. What had started as a minor parking ticket had become a symbol of something much larger, a call for justice and accountability. Devon, on the other hand, threw himself into work. He spent hours meeting with city officials, drafting new policies, and preparing training sessions for officers. His phone rang constantly. Reporters, activists, even mayors from neighboring towns wanted to know more about what he was doing. Devon handled it all with calm determination, though Marcus could tell the pressure was getting to him. One evening, after another long day of meetings, Devon invited Marcus to join him for dinner at a local restaurant. It was a small, family-owned place tucked away on a quiet street. The owner greeted them warmly, though Marcus noticed her eyes lingered a little longer than usual. Word had clearly spread about who they were. As they sat down at a corner table, Devon let out a deep sigh. "I forgot how exhausting this job can be sometimes." Marcus chuckled softly. "You're doing good work, Dev. People notice. They appreciate." "I hope so," Devon replied, rubbing his temples. "But it's not just about me. This isn't my fight alone. It's everyone's fight." Marcus nodded, swirling his glass of water. "Still, you're leading the charge. That takes guts." "Guts or stupidity," Devon joked, though there was a hint of truth in his tone. "Either way, I'm committed. We've got to keep pushing forward." They ordered their meals and talked about the progress they'd made so far. Devon explained that the Civilian Oversight Board was already taking shape, with representatives from various community groups signing on to participate. Mandatory de-escalation training would begin within the month, and regular town hall meetings were scheduled to ensure transparency. "That's amazing," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "But how are the officers reacting? Are they on board?" Devon hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Some are supportive. Others, not so much. Change is hard, especially when it challenges the status quo. But we'll get there. Slowly, but surely." After dinner, they decided to take a walk around the town. The streets were quieter now, lit only by dim lampposts and the occasional glow of a shop window. As they strolled, Marcus noticed posters taped to some of the buildings. One read, "Justice starts with us." Another proclaimed, "Reform now." "Looks like people are inspired," Marcus observed, pointing to the posters. Devon smiled. faintly. Yeah, it's encouraging. But inspiration alone won't fix things. Action will. They stopped near a park where a group of teenagers was gathered, sitting on benches and talking animatedly. Lila was among them, her pink hair unmistakable, even in the low light. When she spotted Marcus and Devin, she waved enthusiastically. "Hey, Mr. Ellis, Chief Reed," she called out, jogging over. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," Marcus said, curious about what was on her mind. Lila glanced at her friends before speaking. "A lot of us have been talking about what happened. We want to help. Like maybe organize a protest or something. Raise awareness, what do you think?" Marcus exchanged a look with Devin, who gave a slight nod. "That's a great idea," Marcus said. "Protests can be powerful, but make sure you plan carefully. Safety first, okay?" Lila grinned. "Got it. Thanks." As she ran back to her friends, Devin shook his head in amazement. "Kids these days, they really care. Makes me hopeful." "They should care," Marcus replied. "Their future depends on it." The next morning, Marcus received a message from Devin asking him to come to the police station. When he arrived, he found Devin in his office, surrounded by stacks of papers and open laptops. On one screen, a video chat window showed several city council members and activists discussing upcoming initiatives. "You're just in time," Devin said, gesturing for Marcus to sit down. "We're finalizing plans for the first town hall meeting. I thought you might want to say a few words." Marcus blinked, surprised. "Me? Why?" "Because your voice matters," Devin explained. "People listen to personal stories. Yours can inspire others to speak up too." Though hesitant at first, Marcus agreed. Over the next hour, they worked together to draft a short speech. Marcus kept it simple, focusing on his experience and the importance of unity. By the time they finished, he felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. That evening, the town hall meeting took place in the same building where Devin had held the press conference. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. Instead of reporters and cameras, the room was filled with ordinary citizens, young and old, diverse faces eager to contribute to the conversation. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Taking a deep breath, he began. "Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus Ellis. You might have heard about what happened to me recently. To be honest, it wasn't easy. Being detained over a parking ticket shouldn't happen to anyone. But here's the thing. It did happen. And instead of letting it defeat me, I chose to see it as an opportunity." He paused, scanning the crowd. "An opportunity to start a conversation. About fairness, about trust, about how we treat each other no matter our differences." Applause broke out, soft at first but growing louder. Marcus smiled, feeling a sense of connection with the people in the room. For the first time since the incident, he truly believed that change was possible. After the meeting ended, many attendees approached Marcus and Devin, sharing their own experiences and offering support. A woman named Clara, who ran a local youth center, suggested partnering with Devin's department to host workshops on conflict resolution. Another man, an older gentleman named Walter, offered to mentor young officers, teaching them the value of empathy and respect. "These are the kinds of partnerships we need," Devin said later as he and Marcus drove home. "Change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we work together." Marcus nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" "It is," Devin confirmed. "And we're going to see it through. Together. Over." The next few weeks, the town transformed. New initiatives sprang up everywhere. The Civilian Oversight Board held its first official meeting, drawing a diverse crowd of participants. Officers attended de-escalation training sessions, learning techniques to diffuse tense situations peacefully. Even the local schools got involved, hosting assemblies to teach students about justice and equality. Through it all, Marcus remained a steady presence. He visited classrooms, spoke at community events, and worked closely with Devin to ensure progress continued. Though the journey was far from over, he knew they were heading in the right direction. One afternoon, as Marcus stood outside the newly renovated youth center, watching kids laugh and play, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had thrown him a curveball, but he'd turned it into something meaningful. Together, he and Devon, and countless others, had sparked a movement rooted in courage, compassion, and the belief that a better tomorrow was possible. Months had passed since the parking ticket incident, and the town was beginning to feel different. Not perfect, far from it, but better. Change was slow, messy, and sometimes frustrating, but it was happening. Marcus could see it in the small things: a police officer stopping to chat with kids on the street, community members volunteering at the youth center, and even strangers smiling at each other as they passed by. Devon, too, had noticed the shift. His department was working harder than ever to rebuild trust, and while not everyone was on board, progress was undeniable. Officers who once resisted new policies were starting to embrace them, especially after seeing how much the community appreciated their efforts. It wasn't easy, but Devon believed that persistence would pay off. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus arrived at the police station to meet with Devon. They'd been planning a special event, a celebration of the changes made so far, and a chance to thank everyone who had contributed. As Marcus walked through the doors, he was greeted by familiar faces. Officers nodded respectfully, and a few even called him by name. It was a far cry from the tension-filled days of the past. "Hey, Marcus," Devon said, stepping out of his office. "Ready for today?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied with a grin. "You sure this is a good idea? Throwing a party for the police department might raise some eyebrows." "It's not just for us," Devon explained. "It's for the whole community. Everyone played a part in making this happen. We're celebrating teamwork, not just law enforcement." Marcus nodded, understanding the sentiment. "All right, let's do it." The event was held at the park where Marcus and Devon had run into Lila and her friends months earlier. Tables were set up with food, drinks, and decorations in bright colors. A stage had been erected for speeches, and local musicians performed throughout the day. Families gathered on blankets, children ran around laughing, and volunteers handed out flyers about upcoming programs. As the crowd grew, Marcus stood near the stage watching everything unfold. He felt a mix of pride and humility. This wasn't his victory. It belonged to everyone who had worked together to make it possible. When it was time for speeches, Devon took the microphone first. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice carrying across the park. "This isn't just a celebration of what we've accomplished. It's a reminder of what we can achieve when we come together." He spoke briefly about the challenges they'd faced and the steps taken to address them. Then he turned to Marcus. "I want to introduce someone who inspired many of us to push harder for change. Marcus Ellis, please join me." Marcus stepped onto the stage, feeling nervous but determined. He looked out at the sea of faces, friends, neighbors, even people he didn't know, and smiled. "Thanks, Devon," he said, shaking hands before turning to the crowd. "I never imagined I'd be standing here talking about something that started with a parking ticket. But life has a funny way of teaching us lessons when we least expect them." He paused, letting his words sink in. "What happened to me wasn't unique. People face unfair treatment every day. What made my situation different was the support I received. From Devon, from this community, and from all of you. That's why we're here today. To say thank you. And to remind ourselves that we still have work to do." The applause was thunderous, echoing through the park. Marcus stepped back, letting Devon wrap up the formalities. Afterward, the festivities continued, with music, games, and laughter filling the air. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus found himself sitting on a bench overlooking the park. Devon joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Nice speech," he said, handing one to Marcus. "Thanks," Marcus replied. "Didn't think I'd get through it without tripping over my words." "You did great," Devon assured him. "People listen to you, Marcus. You have a gift." Marcus shrugged modestly. "If I have a gift, it's because of people like you. You gave me the platform to speak. And you used it well," Devon said firmly. But don't stop now. Keep using your voice. We need leaders like you. They sat in silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the stars appear one by one. Finally, Marcus spoke. Do you think we're making a real difference? Or are we just putting band-aids on bigger problems? Devin sighed, thinking carefully before answering. Both, maybe. Some of what we're doing is temporary fixes, things that will help in the short term but won't solve everything overnight. But other parts, the training, the oversight board, the partnerships with the community, those are long-term solutions. They take time to grow, but they'll stick. Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense. It's just hard to see the big picture sometimes. It is, Devin agreed. But remember, change doesn't happen all at once. It's a ripple effect. One act of kindness leads to another. One person speaking up inspires someone else to do the same. Before you know it, those ripples turn into waves. Marcus smiled. Faintly. You sound like a motivational speaker. Devin laughed. Maybe I missed my calling. They shared a laugh, the sound blending with the distant hum of conversation and music. For a moment, everything felt right. The world wasn't perfect, but it was moving in the right direction. A few weeks later, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a conference in another city. Activists, politicians, and community leaders from across the country would gather to discuss policing reform and social justice. Devin encouraged him to go, knowing it was an opportunity to share their story on a larger stage. I'll miss having you around, Devin admitted as they prepared for Marcus's trip. But this is important. People need to hear what you have to say. I'll miss you too, Marcus replied. But don't worry, I'll come back. There's still plenty of work to do here. On the day of the conference, Marcus stood backstage waiting for his turn to speak. His heart raced, but he reminded himself why he was there. This wasn't about him. It was about the movement, about showing others that change was possible if they worked together. When he finally stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes watched him, waiting. Taking a deep breath, Marcus began. My name is Marcus Ellis. A few months ago, I was detained by police over a parking ticket. At the time, I thought it was just another example of injustice, a story that happens too often in our communities. But instead of staying silent, I chose to speak up. And because of that choice, something incredible happened. He went on to describe the events that followed, emphasizing the role of partnership, accountability, and determination. By the time he finished, the audience erupted into applause, standing ovations rippling through the crowd. Afterward, dozens of people approached, Marcus eager to learn more. Some asked for advice on organizing protests, while others wanted tips on building relationships with local officials. Marcus answered each question patiently, grateful for the chance to inspire others. By the end of the conference, Marcus knew his work was far from over. There were still battles to fight, systems to challenge, and hearts to win. But he also knew he wasn't alone. Across the country, people were waking up to the need for change. Together, they were creating a future, rooted in fairness and hope. When Marcus returned home, Devin greeted him with a wide smile. How did it go? Better than I expected, Marcus admitted. People are ready to listen, ready to act. Devin clapped him on the shoulder. See? Told you you'd knock 'em dead. They laughed, sharing a moment of camaraderie. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Marcus felt confident. With Devin by his side, and countless others joining the cause, they were proving that even the smallest actions could spark monumental change. Months turned into a year, and the town continued to grow stronger. The changes Devin and Marcus had worked so hard to implement were taking root, becoming part of everyday life. Officers patrolled neighborhoods with smiles instead of scowls, stopping to chat with residents and play catch with kids. Community meetings became lively discussions where everyone, citizens, officers, and leaders, shared ideas and concerns openly. People no longer avoided the police station. They visited it, bringing baked goods or simply dropping by to say hello. Marcus, too, had found his place in this new world. After speaking at the conference, He'd been invited to share his story in other cities. Each trip reinforced his belief that change was possible, even in places where distrust ran deep. He returned home inspired, eager to keep building bridges between communities and law enforcement. One sunny afternoon, Marcus stood inside the youth center he'd helped open. It was bustling with activity. Kids playing basketball, teenagers, working on art projects, volunteers teaching classes on leadership and conflict resolution. Clara, the woman who ran the center, approached him with a warm smile. "You've done good work here," she said, gesturing around the room. "These kids look up to you." Marcus shook his head modestly. "I didn't do this alone. You, Devin, everyone, they made it happen." "But you started it," Clara insisted. "And now look at them. They're learning skills that'll last a lifetime." As if on cue, a group of children ran up to Marcus, tugging at his sleeves. "Mr. Ellis, can you play basketball with us?" Marcus laughed, ruffling one boy's hair. All right, let me see if I still remember how to shoot." The kids cheered, dragging him toward the court. For the next hour, Marcus played with them, laughing as they tried to block his shots and celebrating when they scored. Watching him from the sidelines, Devin couldn't help but smile. This was what it was all about. The connections, the laughter, the shared moments that reminded everyone of their humanity. Later that evening, after the kids had gone home, Marcus and Devin sat together in the quiet center. The sun was setting, casting golden light through the windows. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhausted but content. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "when this whole thing started, I never imagined it would lead to this." Devin raised an eyebrow. "This?" "This," Marcus repeated, gesturing around the room. "A place where kids feel safe, where people trust each other, where we can actually talk about problems instead of pretending they don't exist." "It's not perfect," Devin admitted. "There are still bad days, still disagreements, but it's better than it was." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, "and that's worth something." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, reflecting on everything they'd accomplished. Finally, Devin spoke. "You ever think about writing a book? About all this?" Marcus chuckled. "Me? Write a book? I'm not much of a writer." "You don't have to be," Devin replied. "Just tell your story. People need to hear it. Not just here, but everywhere." Marcus considered the idea, turning it over in his mind. Maybe Devin was right. Maybe sharing his journey could inspire others to take action in their own communities. After all, stories had power. Stories could spark change. "I'll think about it," Marcus said finally. "But only if you promise to write the foreword." Devin grinned. "Deal." A few weeks later, Marcus began jotting down notes for the book. At first, it felt strange, putting his thoughts into words, reliving the highs and lows of the past year. But as he wrote, he realized how much he'd grown, how much they all had grown. The parking ticket incident hadn't defined him, it had shaped him. It had shown him the importance of standing firm, speaking up, and trusting in the power of community. When the first draft was finished, Marcus showed it to Devin. "What do you think?" he asked nervously. Devin read it carefully, nodding occasionally. When he reached the end, he looked up, his expression thoughtful. "It's honest," he said. "That's what people will connect with, your honesty." Encouraged by Devin's feedback, Marcus sent the manuscript to a publisher. To his surprise, they accepted it immediately, eager to share his story with the world. Within months, the book hit shelves, sparking conversations across the country. Readers praised its simplicity and sincerity, calling it a guide for anyone hoping to make a difference. The success of the book brought new opportunities. Marcus traveled to schools, libraries, and community centers, giving talks and hosting workshops. Everywhere he went, people thanked him, not just for the book, but for reminding them that change was possible, that ordinary people could create extraordinary impact. Back home, the town embraced Marcus's achievements with pride. A mural was painted on the side of the youth center, depicting Marcus and Devin shaking hands beneath the words, "Together, We build a better tomorrow. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder of how far they'd come. One evening, as Marcus walked through the park where the celebration had taken place, he noticed a young girl sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook. She looked up as he approached, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Are you Mr. Ellis?" she asked shyly. "I am," Marcus replied, smiling. "What are you drawing?" She held up her notebook, revealing a picture of the mural. "I like it," she said. "It makes me feel brave." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. "Brave, huh? Why's that?" "Because it shows that people can fix things," she explained, "even when they're broken." Her words stayed with him long after he left the park. They reminded him why he'd fought so hard, not for recognition, but for moments like this. Moments where someone realized they had the power to make a difference. Years passed, and the town continued to thrive. The youth center expanded, offering programs for adults as well as children. The Civilian Oversight Board remained active, ensuring accountability within the police department, and Marcus and Devin stayed close, their friendship stronger than ever. One day, as they sat on Devin's porch watching the sunset, Marcus turned to his friend. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that parking ticket never happened?" Devin thought for a moment before answering. "Probably, but then I remind myself, it did happen. And because of it, we built something amazing." Marcus nodded, gazing out at the horizon. "Yeah, something amazing." In the distance, the sound of laughter drifted through the air. Children playing, neighbors chatting, lives intertwining. It was a simple scene, yet it carried profound meaning. Proof that even the smallest actions could ripple outward, touching countless lives. As darkness fell, Marcus stood and stretched. "Well, I should get going. Early morning tomorrow." Devin stood too, clapping him on the shoulder. "Take care, my friend, and remember, you've already changed the world." Marcus smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "We both have." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the night. Behind him, the town hummed with life, a testament to the power of courage, unity, and hope. And somewhere, a young girl sketched another picture, dreaming of a brighter future.